Hey, Ahar here, and today we're going over Pump's article on why you should and shouldn't play Guardian Druid in Season 2, patch 10.1. Alright, we're just going to jump straight into it. And we're going to go to the, first bullet points of why you should. High tank DPS, 100%, Guardian Druid is very good in terms of dealing damage. In Season 1, I believe Brewmasters were the only tank that did higher damage than Guardian Druid. Guardian Druid has very good AoE and single target. So if there are any Guardian Druids who are having issues with that, it might be an issue with the spamming. And that's actually part of the shouldn't. But I'll get into that in a bit. Innervate, that definitely is more of a niche, unique thing. I think this would be a little bit more useful inside of Raid than for M+. Generally speaking, healers don't really go too much in M+, at least in Season 1. I think it might change a bit more in Season 2. But even then, it's like a healer meta thing where you definitely want healers that can do a lot of throughput while not going since, drinking does take time. So, Innervate will still probably be more of a minor thing in terms of M+. I don't know about the very rare tank and cool animations. I mean, those are nice, but not necessarily why you should. I think those are more of a joke bullet points. But as far as you shouldn't, it definitely is lacking unique identity in terms of being a tank. You don't have anything that you can really bring to the table in both Raid and M+. Like, say for example, Prop Paladins, you got Bubble to immune certain mechanics. In Raid and in M+, very, very useful. I think the only, unique thing that Guardian Druid does have would be after the wildfire healing. And it is very good. But it's not good enough to where it will be better than something like a Spell Bop, Rallying Cry, Wogs, although they did nerf Wogs, so I'll leave that out. AMZ, etc. Okay, and then inflexible weak talent trees, I will agree with that to a certain extent. I think there are a lot of things in the Guardian talent tree that could be very good. Like, you do have a lot of choices, so it's not necessarily inflexible in the sense that, there aren't very many options to choose from. There are actually a lot of options to choose from. It's inflexible in the way that you have no points to really go take those alternative routes. And that's the point that really sucks. You always have to balance your points between taking defensive talents or taking defensive talents versus taking offensive talents, which, is the case for, generally speaking, most tank trees, but it hurts a lot more in the Guardian tree compared to the other tank trees. Boring tier set bonuses, I would say so, yes. Although I would argue some of the other tank set bonuses are also fairly boring, but for the most part, I would say Guardian tier set doesn't change how you play at all. That being said, the 2-piece for Guardian Druid is very strong. Okay, so I'm not gonna say it's like boring and weak. Definitely not the case. The 2 set is very strong, but does it change our gameplay? No, it does not. Does it really fix the issue that Guardian Druid had? No, it probably does not. It will help a bit, but it definitely does not fix the glaring issue, which is magic damage intake. And that's the severely punished for imperfect play. So that definitely ties into that. As far as Guardian Druid is compared to the other tanks, so you know, in terms of imperfect play, most of the other tanks have cheat death. Your Blood DK, your Vengeance, your Prop Paladin. Prop Paladin even has 2 cheat deaths, and it's on a 45-second cooldown. Alright, we're gonna jump down into the explanation part now for the why you shouldn't play Guardian Druid. Tuning issues in terms of, just passive active mitigation, or I shouldn't say passive slash active, but rather just your general mitigation for most damage events. So we're not talking about on use defensives minus whatever percent damage reduction, like bark skin, SI, things like that. The passive mitigation would be Iron Fur, 4-set, 2-set piece bonuses, things like that. So Iron Fur, definitely a lot weaker than, your block tanks, specifically, Prot Warrior, Prot Paladin. And then, again, against magic damage, you don't have, tattoos like Vengeance. You don't have the passive whatever, it's like, 30% damage reduction from standing inside Consecrate, things like that. What you do have against those, usually speaking, are Bark Skin and SI, Rage of the Sleeper, and for the most part, pretty much every other tank has about the same thing. You got Spell Reflex, you got Last Stand, Wall, Shield Wall, Final Stands, things like that. You have a lot of other things. And then in terms of the healing, Frenzied Regen is very good, okay, inside of Incarn specifically, but then outside of Incarn is where Guardian Druids really have an issue. And inside of low, or like when you deal with low pull counts where you just can't reset your Incarn fast enough, low density dungeons, raid tanking, say for example, your Incarn will usually be a lot longer. You'll have Incarn every like 2 to 230, something like that, especially in single target situations. And so when you have to take heavy ticks, heavy bleeds, magic dots, whatever it might be, you're really struggling, because for the most part you only have 2 charges of Frenzied Regen on a fairly long cooldown. It's not the same as, or rather, it's weaker than Death Strike, weaker than Wogs, things like that. So it is definitely a lot weaker in terms of the raiding scenario. You don't have as much to deal with those ticking bleeds, ticking things. I would say maybe Brewmaster might be also comparable in the terms that it doesn't have too much. Although they did get, I forgot what it was called, but something T where they heal 15%, 2 charges. I think the cooldown on those are 30 seconds. So it's a little comparable to that. Frenzied Regen is a bit better. But they also have, a bit more. They also have Expel Harm, also on a fairly short cooldown. But by far, I would agree the biggest issue that pretty much most Guardian Druids have is Frenzied Regen being on the global cooldown, and this also ties in with playing imperfectly. A lot of the times, as a Guardian Druid, you got you take some kind of big hit, and a lot of the times those big hits also apply bleed. And if you're 1 second late, or maybe 2 seconds late, well, 2 seconds will probably be a misplay, but if you're a second late, because of a GCD lock, then you will dip very low. And a lot of the times, if you take another hit on top of that, you'll probably die. Now that being said, obviously, you should be pressing a defensive or having your defensives planned out for those packs, etc. But again, it just ties into, Guardian Druid doesn't really have that cheat death like the other tanks do. I would say, Guardian Druid's form of cheat death is the Well-Honed Instinct, which I believe heals you. It just heals you with another Frenzied Regen. Definitely weaker than the other classes. Alright. Now, going into the Lackluster tier bonus, I want to say Pumps is talking about this from the perspective of raid tanking. In terms of M+ tanking, I would say it is very strong. Specifically the Rage Generation. The passive healing is also very good, but it's nothing, too significant. It's not gonna, keep you alive through all dungeon or all damage throughout a dungeon. But for sure, the Rage Generation does help on smaller packs, packs that are, 3 to 5 mobs. You will have more Rage Generation there, and that will definitely help you. So this should help tankiness outside of Incarn windows, because usually inside of Incarn you're pulling doubles, triples. So there shouldn't be any issues in terms of Rage Generation there. Most of the times it's going to be 8 to 10 mobs, you're rage capped no matter what. If anything, the 2-set now, when you pull those packs, you will probably be playing Raze, spamming both Raze and Iron Fur, and you'll still probably be rage capped if you pull big enough. Entering the 12+ target territory. We already kind of went over the missing identity in terms of, other classes having special things like, magic immunity, grips, things like that, AMZs. Okay, now the weak talent tree, I didn't really think too much about this before, but for sure, in terms of the class tree, in terms of the Druid tree, there definitely are a lot of dead talents, and this for sure ties in a bit with the issue that Druid has 4 classes. It's the only class in the game where you have 4 different specs, and so it does get a little rough and difficult to kind of balance. So I don't necessarily blame them for having a lot of dead talents, but at the same time there definitely needs to be a rework in terms of the Druid class tree. Realistically, when are you ever using any of these points, right? You're not ever shapeshifting out of bear form to weave, simply because you do very minimal damage now compared to back in BFA. And then obviously the Reju Swiftmens, those are maybe, once or twice a dungeon, if any. And you'll never be shifting into cat form. You go into melee as cat form, you're just dead. And that kind of ties into the this little shapeshifter's fervor. I didn't know about this, but apparently there was a mechanic where shifting, you would retain, a lot of the armor and health. Or not retain, but you would have a lot of armor and health, which is definitely a nice little bonus if you did want Druid to be, weaving into cat form or weaving into the other forms. Would definitely help a bit. I think if anything, that would have been one of the more unique things of Guardian Druid. Say for example, you could kite things for a long time, going to cat form, and then weaving in damage as Boomkin. And you did do that. You definitely did do that in previous X packs. You did do that for certain packs. And that would be a bit more of a unique thing that Guardian Druids can do. I think the other tanks that could perhaps do that are probably Monk. And I'm not talking about just kiting. I'm talking about kiting while still doing a good amount of damage. I think Brewmaster is the only tank that can really do that at the moment. Maybe Prop Pally as well. So yeah. It would be more of a unique thing, I guess. It wouldn't necessarily be unique, but a bit more unique. Scrolling down, I do not agree with the Incarn being a mediocre cooldown. I think Incarn is extremely strong. I think this is more of a raid perspective. Incarn is extremely strong in M+, extremely strong. You for the most part cannot die since you have infinite frenzied regions. Obviously, you don't need Incarn for that. You can use Berserk for it, but Incarn is very strong because you can get it down to a minute 30, especially with the increased rage generation from 2 beasts. I do think if you pull big enough, you can definitely get your Incarn down to minute 15. Say for example on the Algathar first pull, where you pull the Lashers, you already had your Incarn down to like a minute 15 on that pull. So with the increased rage generation, you probably have it down to like a minute. Either way though. I would agree inside of raid scenario, like I said, single target situations, you probably have Incarn on like, I don't know, like 2:15, probably 2:15 cooldown. And in that sense, it doesn't really help you much either. It's not like you need to be pressing Frenzied Region 24/7. So I can definitely see how it's pretty weak there. Not very strong. Doesn't necessarily give you a lot more damage. Or actually, no, not necessarily. It does give you a lot more damage. I'm gonna take that back. It does actually give you a lot more damage. But for sure, it doesn't necessarily help you a lot with survivability in terms of raid. Just from a raid perspective, single target bosses. Because usually for those bosses, you know, you have like someone like a tank buster every 30 seconds, and a lot of times they do apply bleeds or dot. And so, you know, you have Incarn for one of them. Okay, great. What are you gonna do for the next one? You're fucked, kind of thing. So for that, I do understand. And I 100% agree with the, you know, making Incarn into 5 different points. I don't understand that decision by Blizzard for sure. I think that definitely sucks. Should be changed for sure. It's a nice idea putting Incarn into the left side of the tree, because every druid does use Incarn, with the exception of Resto Druid. And so I don't know. I do think that would be a very nice change for sure. It would make sense for their Incarn to be in the class tree rather than in the spec tree. And then for sure, inside the spec tree for Guardian Druid, there are a lot of talents that are absolutely useless. You would just never take it. Extremely weak. Don't make sense where they're placed. So some of the ones that he pointed out, you know, Innate Resolve used to be baseline. Infected Wounds, you would just never take this. Compared to the other points on the tree. Improved SI. Like, just a lot of these things should be baseline. Would make Guardian Druid a bit tankier, which they definitely need to be. And then Lunar Beam being one of the capstones is a joke. It just made no sense that they tried to balance Lunar Beam, or they tried to like make it stronger by increasing the healing it did. So Dreamless Cenarius is very strong with the, I forgot the name of the point in the class tree. It is very strong when it crits. You know, this is, you know, your equivalent of the Wog on like usually 30 seconds. But realistically, you would never take this. The points you need to get there is unreal. I don't want to get too much into this because there's a lot of things. Like Dreamless Scenarios just shouldn't be on the lower row. It should be more towards the middle row where some of the Frenzied Region talents are, and then obviously some of these should be baseline. But again, I don't want to get into that because that should probably be like a whole different video. But yeah, for the most part, that was pretty much about it. I do agree with most of the things. I do think some of the things are, for the most part, from a raid perspective from pumps. So I just kind of wanted to chime in a little bit in terms of the M+. Who knows? Maybe the class tuner will see this video and have a bit more of an insight, at least from a higher M+ Guardian Druid perspective, I guess. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, and maybe in the next one I'll kind of go over the tree and what I would like to see changed. See you guys in the next one.